So many of you have heard the wonderful discussion that JoAnn Falletta and I had a few months ago, and we're going to continue with yet another one because there were so many topics that I'm interested in, that I know JoAnn's interested in, that we, I think you'll see
I hope so.
that we haven't even begun. So I'm gonna start with talking about conducting rather than about music right now. But what about technique, conducting? What conductors should be interested in? There's so many, I'm sure, young conductors come to you and they say, what can I do to become a conductor? I mean, in essence, they're conductors, but they're not professional. What can I do? So, what do you say?
Well, I would love to say at that point, it all starts from your scholarship about the music, studying the scores, working on understanding it, knowing that as your life experience grows, your understanding of the piece will grow, but spending as much time as you can with your head in that score, analyzing everything and trying to find out, talk to musicians, talk to instrumentalists in the orchestra about this passage or that passage, or what would you do here, or what are the challenges for you in this piece. Find things out. But too often, Jerry, I find that conductors who are very young come to me as if that's all been done, and say, okay, I have some questions. How do you get a job? How do you get an agent? How much money should I ask for? Well, those are relevant questions, I guess. But the idea of being a conductor is knowing what you're doing and learning, constantly learning. So.
Well, the other thing that I find, I agree, of course. I think we always agree. But
we do. We do agree.
There was one other thing that I find interesting is that, yes, that's what they all want, is how do you get an agent? Well, I understand all of that. And then they want to know, how do you beat? And I'm making a terrible generalization that I try not to do, but in general, it's about beating, about how do you beat. And really, quite frankly, it's not what it's about. I mean, you look at the great conductors of the present, like you, or of the past. And everybody has a different technique. Everybody beats in a different way. Orchestras learn to follow, and you guide them. And if they're not following, you adjust. You do whatever you have to do. But let's talk about the actual beating. Do you have any kind of philosophy about how to beat?
Well, in some ways, I think beating is the least interesting part of being a conductor.
I agree, 100%.
But you have to beat in a way that makes it easy for the orchestra to play. So my basic concept of beating is that it should be like breathing, so that you're constantly moving rather than pointing at people. But whatever, you're constantly moving, so that it's like playing a stringed instrument or playing a wind or a brass instrument, where the breath is coming all the time. So that makes it easier to play. So, but people can do that in so many different ways. It's not about down, left, right, up. It's more about creating a kind of landscape where people can play with a beautiful sound. And if you're beating in a certain way, they can play. So,
have you noticed? I'll tell you a story. When I was very young, starting out, I played, and there was a conducting competition in New York called the Metropolis Competition, and I played first trumpet in that. I was a teenager, and we played, I think, probably for the semifinals and the finals, and people like Bernstein would be on the jury, and every conductor came, they give a beat, and like that, the orchestra had a different sound. So I'm sitting in the back, and I'm just observing this. Can you explain why that happens, or how that happens?
It is the most fascinating mystery to me, but I suppose it does happen from exactly their gestures. Not only how they beat, how they're standing, how they're breathing, even the expression they have on their face. All of that subconsciously contributes to a sound. But again, if you're thinking that you're creating a kind of silent music as you're beating, then it's easier for them to make music back at you.
True enough. Now we get into. I'm gonna have to get just a little bit. We get into this discussion quite often about rebound and downbeat, and I've done it a lot. But can you talk about that a little bit? Explain it a little bit, and then.
Well, every orchestra is different too, and I think you have to downbeat. In the Buffalo Philharmonic is quite different than other orchestras. When you have to give them a chance to know what the sound should be. So if you give an upbeat that gives them a chance to breathe and play, or in the case of an orchestra like Buffalo, where they play after the beat, that allows the sound to bloom. other type of repertoire, you have to be a little bit, they have to be with you, and you've got to, so you're constantly adjusting to what they're playing, what they need from you, and how it's going to work. And I'm sure, as you're constantly making subtle adjustments all the time, not saying anything, not doing anything drastically different, but just a subtle adjustment to help the clarinet have a little more time, or to prepare the cellos in a way that makes them more comfortable. And that's the beauty of it.
Well, what's interesting about that is that we do both. People often think, oh, you're a conductor does a lot of downbeats, or you're a conductor does a lot of rebounds. But as you just pointed out,
Right.
depending upon the music, you do both, and
Yeah.
it's all cleared by the upbeat.
That's right. That's right. Well, and orchestras always tell me that's what they rely on. The upbeat is so important for them to breathe, for them to get ready, for them to get their bow on the string and start moving. It's everyone has to feel that it works for them.
What about the difference? I mean, so do you find a difference when you conduct the winds and brass, let's say, or the strings? I mean, is that?
Well, most of the time we have to provide something that they all feel comfortable with, that they all can read and feel comfortable. So, yes, sometimes when I have strings alone, I almost feel like I'm conducting a choir, and I don't have to be quite so careful about a meticulous, breathing downbeat, because they're all working together, and that's kind of nice. But generally, you're working with sometimes a chorus as well.
Sure.
So you have to incorporate all of those needs into what you do, and if it doesn't work, you adjust it.
Now you conduct with a baton.
Yes.
But do you have a philosophy about baton or no baton?
I occasionally conduct with no baton if it's the kind of thing like a sort of moment of a hymn-like moment, or where maybe the sound can be more colored without it. But I think having a baton is easier for the orchestra to see you and read what you're doing. So I do that for that reason. That it extends my arm, it extends our arm, and more people can see it out of the corner of their eye, or in a way that they don't have to actually look up, but they can see you. So for the ease of the orchestra, in a large orchestra, I think it helps me.
What about the variety? I mean, so when your hand, there's a certain amount you can do, but with the baton, it seems to me, and I'm curious what you think, that there's a lot more variety you can have in the beat itself.
You can. I mean, even the way you hold the baton, or change how you hold the grip of the baton makes a difference, or the angle that the baton is facing, up, down, to the left or right. I mean, all of that gives subtle indications of a certain sound that you want.
Absolutely. Why do you think, now, so I'm moving away now from the technique and back to the repertoire like we did last time. A thing that is very interesting to me is to try to understand why we American orchestras do not play American music. Now, we play a lot of new music. You play, I play, we do. But most orchestras do not play anything to do with the history of American music. Whether it's by John Knowles Paine, I mean, I know you. I'm not talking about you now. I'm talking about.
No, but I understand what you're saying.
Whether it's John Knowles Paine or Edward McDowell, even, or Arthur Foote, or the next generation of symphonists, William Schumann, Alan Hovhannes, all those. Why? How come we don't do it?
It's a mystery. It's almost, sometimes I feel there's almost a little sense of embarrassment about our history. And why is that? Because these pieces are fantastic works. A lot of them influenced by European tradition, and why not?
Why not?
Almost every culture was influenced by Germanic, Austrian tradition of writing. So why not? And they're beautifully crafted, and yet we feel that either it has to be a classic, perhaps like Gershwin, or something brand new.
Mm-hmm.
And,
that's right. Well, they're the exceptions. I mean, obviously Copland's an exception, Bernstein's an exception, Gershwin maybe a little bit Ives, but when you think about all of those composers writing symphonies in 1950, let's say.
But you were recording those, playing and recording those before anyone else was.
Thank you, but it's
It
true.
was, it's true.
It didn't catch on. I mean, the music is played more now, certainly, but I think when you look back to me, one of my great heroes was Koussevitzky because of the repertoire he did. Right. And he did those pieces.
He did them.
He did the ones, he did Arthur Foote, who was dead,
Right.
but he also did William Schumann and,
Right,
and
right.
David Diamond, who were alive.
Well, because I think he was very aware of the continuity of American music and how everything written has influenced everything today, and in a way that we're proud of, and we should be proud of. And he also was, I love the fact that if he discovered a piece he liked, he'd play it 3 seasons in a row.
That's right.
And make sure that the audience got to know it. So, and how many people do that anymore?
Not many, and it's you're asking. I want to compare it a little bit. So now I know. So this is now not an interview; it's a discussion. If you look at what my old student Wyndham Marsalis does at Jazz on Lincoln Center, he deals with the history of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that's cutting edge, they do, but they do Duke Ellington and they do Charlie Parker and they do Louis Armstrong and everyone else. And so you go to Jazz at Lincoln Center and you will get a whole century and more, obviously more, of great American jazz. There is none of the, let's now call it the most affluent orchestras. So I was in Seattle for all those years. That was not one of the most affluent. You're in Buffalo and Virginia. They're not among the affluent ones. You know, the Bostons and New York and Philadelphia and Chicago and so forth. They don't do that. They just don't do it. And
you know what was surprising to me, Jerry, is that in Boston's case especially, they commissioned many of those pieces.
they premiered most of them.
They premiered them, and they've tucked them away in a cupboard somewhere, and never to be played again.
No.
Shouldn't they celebrate that they
That's
actually
right.
commissioned these great pieces?
And that gets to be our responsibility. And so people talk about American conductors and they don't have the major jobs. And I don't think there's any prejudice against American. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I don't think so.
No.
I mean, I think
So, but the problem is if you hire only European conductors who don't know about our tradition or care about it, they won't program those pieces. And like you don't say, oh, you should program them. No, you program what you believe in and what you care
and what
about.
you know,
And what you know.
You know, occasionally I've had a Chinese conductor, for instance, call me and say, I've just gotten appointed to the American Orchestra. Help me know what I should do with American music. And I think, what a deep thinker this person is. He knows that it's not in his background, but yet he has an American orchestra and he wants to celebrate that.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
but it doesn't always happen.
No.
It's true.
No, it doesn't. Let me just. So let's talk about something that people are interested in. I'm interested in. How do you pick players? So you have auditions behind the screen, in front of the screen, whatever it is. What's your criteria? What are you looking for in a player?
Well, ours is always behind a screen to
Even
the
the
end.
finals.
Even the finals. That's in the Buffalo contract. Even the finals. So it makes us pick, of course, just by listening. So we know nothing about the person. We don't even know how they move, which can be sometimes a little
Now
frustrating.
let's talk about that for a second. We'll come back to if there's an executive who's going to be making $100,000 a year or whatever it is, would you ever not meet them?
You'd have to.
I mean, I remember when I was in Seattle, our finals were without a screen, so I get to see them, but I was not allowed to interview them. In other words, I couldn't talk to them. I mean, can you
And
imagine?
I think it still
you're getting a
is that
job
way.
that pays $125,000 a year, and you're not even allowed to say, "How are you today?" You're not. I mean, it's against the rules. Is that bizarre?
It is bizarre, and we tried once to because we often now ask our musicians to speak to kids, to have a presence in front of the orchestra, in front of the audience, where they might introduce a concert. So it would be nice to know that they can do that.
Well, shouldn't it be a requirement? I mean, of course, the old timers said, "Well, I'm here to play, and I'm going to play, and then you do the talk, and the." Well, it's not the world anymore. The world now is we are the ambassadors.
Yes.
When I talk about orchestras, you talk about Buffalo. How many of your players teach privately? Do you figure
Everyone.
And so what are they? They're not only making great music with you and others in their community, they're also the individual teachers, many of them, of the next generation of violinists. Whether they become professionals, not important, but they represent culture, they represent high art.
Right. They're the musical mosaic of the whole city. I mean, they play chamber music, they teach in the colleges sometimes. And you're right, so we need to know how they communicate.
Well, it's absurd. I mean, this idea of fairness, I'm a believer in fairness, of course. But, I mean, come on.
Well, and I think a lot of the young musicians that we're seeing now want to do that too. they want to have a role.
Well,
They want to greet the public. They want to talk to the audience. They want to be able to express what a piece is about. And
Well, I
they're
know at
intelligent
Juilliard,
and
when
eloquent.
kids give recitals at Juilliard for their graduation,
Yeah.
they are required to speak to the audience.
Good.
Because, I mean, some do it better than others, of course.
Right.
That goes with it. And, you know, some are not comfortable. But on the other hand, unless you try it, unless you learn, you'll never be comfortable.
Right. I mean, which of us is comfortable immediately doing that? I mean, it
Well,
takes a while.
For me, the worst part of, and I talked a lot in my day to the audience, because I had a whole series of that. All I really wanted to do was conduct. I didn't want to. Okay, now let's get beyond that. So now here the people are playing for you. What are you looking for?
In an audition.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, I guess the simple things, first of all, accuracy. I mean, it's amazing sometimes how many people ignore dynamic variations, and you're looking for the greatest nuance you can get. I mean, and the sense in the end that the person knows the piece, that they've played it, or at least they've absorbed it enough that they know how to play it, so that when
They know
play
how it goes.
Yeah, but also they know how Debussy sounds, and it doesn't sound like Shostakovich,
Right,
you know, because
right.
I think that's the single thing that is disappointing in auditions is sometimes you'll have someone play 10 excerpts with good rhythm and good intonation, but they all sound the same. There's no fragrance of where this music comes from. Maybe that requires experience, or just really studying, really being in the world of that music. So that's what I listen for. Does it sound like they know what this music should sound like?
Interesting. Yeah, I remember once doing an audition finals. Of course, I give sight. Do you do sight reading?
Occasionally we do, not always.
Oh, I always do sight
You
reading.
do.
But I give them Brahms symphonies to sight.
Oh, the hard things.
Or a Beethoven symphony, or a Mozart symphony.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm not trying to trip them up.
Right.
I'm not, oh,
With
try
something
this.
so, or in a kind of rhythmic
I remember
complexity.
when I was at New York Philharmonic, we had a trombone opening, and I was on the committee, and the first trombone wrote this very complicated, difficult, changing meter piece.
Right.
That to play, it was, wasn't that difficult. But, and
Yeah.
of course, most of them had trouble with the rhythm. I mean, come on. Really.
But that doesn't tell you a
Doesn't tell you
great
anything.
deal about that you need
On the
to
other
know.
hand, I remember once having a viola play, and I gave her a Brahms symphony. She plays dee da da dee dee da 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 dee da da. I'm not half slower than half tempo.
Right.
And I said, "Have you ever heard this piece before?" She said, "No." This is someone who's in a conservatory. You have to have a love of the music. You have to know the repertoire. I mean, I've had conductors audition for assistant conductor in Seattle who didn't know repertoire,
Right.
didn't know pieces.
But you have to have, I think a conductor has to have that kind of appetite for just listening all the time. Like I tell young conductors, go to every rehearsal you can. Every single rehearsal. And just bring your score and learn it that way.
Yeah, but they won't conduct.
They want to conduct.
They don't want to
They want
listen.
to have a job. I know.
I want to conduct. How much podium time am I going to
I
get? It's all
Well,
very.
you have your young conductors sit on your rehearsals, right?
Of
In the
course.
summer, of course.
Well, no,
you know.
none of that. We have 3 orchestras at Eastern. So 2 of them are student orchestras and 1 professional orchestra, and they also conduct the sectionals of the student orchestras. I mean, we have them do a lot.
Right.
It's a very exciting profession. Okay, last time we talked a little bit about dealing with the boards and blah, blah, blah. Now let's talk about dealing with the executive directors in Virginia or Buffalo or anywhere else. So the executive directors nowadays have different titles. Sometimes they're called CEO, sometimes they're called president, sometimes they're all different names, but what they are is the administrative director of the orchestra, while you are the artistic director. What's that relationship like? How has it changed? Give me some
Well, I
thoughts
think
about
that's the crux of the success of the orchestra. If the executive director and the music director can work together and can have the same vision for it. Now, that doesn't mean the executive director has to pick the pieces or say, I like this, don't do that symphony, do this. But the idea that you're both supporting the success of the artistic success of the orchestra. That, to me, is a great executive director. Now, that doesn't mean that executive director is not going to call me on something saying, we can't really do Mahler 2 this year. It's been a tough this or that, and we've got to wait. I don't mind that. In fact, I welcome the fact that he or she is being so careful about protecting the health of the orchestra.
Of course.
But first and foremost, the executive director's there because he or she is supporting the artistic integrity. It's about the orchestra. In the end, it's all about what the orchestra does.
Why do you think that so many executive directors and music directors come to loggerheads? I mean, I remember here in New York when two people who were friends, Deborah Borda, who's the executive director, president of the New York Philharmonic now, and Kurt Mazur, who's a dear friend of mine, just didn't even speak to each other when they were there before she went out to Los Angeles.
Right. You know, I think that they sometimes feel that they're on opposite sides of the room. That the executive director is interested only in balancing the budget or something like that, and the music director is interested only in doing the biggest pieces possible. You know, just to make it simple. But
what about this idea that certainly is not something I embrace, but that people talk about power and talk about control? Who is the most powerful? Who is running it really? And who? I mean, is that something you think ever comes into play?
It shouldn't. It shouldn't. I mean, I know that both Jan Hart and I in Buffalo teasingly refer to each other as the boss. You know, the boss doesn't want to do this, but the fact that we both call each other the boss shows that we you know, we're great friends. And no, it's not about power. You know, in fact, Jerry, let me just say that again. It's not about power because conducting always seems to be about power. Even the audience thinks, "Wow, that's a powerful conductor." It's not about power. It's about an enormous responsibility. Every single day, every single thing you do.
People say that all the time. Oh, you're in such a powerful position, really?
No.
Or you feel like you're in the most horrible position in the world because you're responsible to Beethoven. Okay,
you're
how can I do
responsible to Beethoven. You're responsible to the musicians. You're responsible to the audience. I know. So it's not a position of power. It's a position of responsibility and trust that people put in you.
What about rehearsals? Do you have a special approach to rehearsals of a new piece or a standard piece?
Well, I think a few things. I always like to let the orchestra play a bit more in the first rehearsal. Let's talk. We haven't been with each other for a couple of weeks. This is a piece that we haven't done maybe for 5 or 6 years. Let's play the first movement all the way through and just see how it feels. And somehow, Jerry, as you know, by the time you get to the end, you're sort of back in the groove again. You know, but you can't really do that except if you play it, you know. And I always like to start to make sure rehearsals are not every piece is on every rehearsal. The first rehearsal, let's just do the Brahms Symphony. Then we'll do the Piston Incredible Flutist to begin the second rehearsal. Completely different. You know, people are laughing, people are enjoying it. They're, you know, barking when the barking dog section, and that's different. And then when you go back to Brahms. So sometimes working with an orchestra is about engaging their imagination. So keeping it fresh that way, but letting them play, because I always try and remind myself that's what they want. They don't want to stop. They want to play.
They love to play. That's
they
why they
love to play.
What about the relationship of the orchestra to the community? You know, everyone wants to feel like that you belong and that you're part of the community. How does an orchestra get to be part of the community in that way?
Well, the conductor can help. You know, when we do our pre-concert talks, I'm sure you do the same thing. I always point out, listen for Alex's solo on the principal trumpet, because he's got a great one. This is one of the top ones, you know, on the trumpet list of incredible solos. Or aren't we lucky that we have this woodwind section? You can hear how beautifully they balance this. So, and then I mention people by name. They sometimes participate in the pre-concert talk where they'll talk about, okay, what's the challenge for a horn player in Mahler 5? Just their even if it's 5 minutes, the audience identifies with them, and I think that helps. We do coffee concerts, for instance, in the morning, and the musicians go out and have coffee and donuts before the concert with the audience members. And I watch this, and I just think, what better advocates could we have for the orchestra than they themselves? They're so charming. They're so natural. They're you know, so interested in having people like this music and talking about it. So they are fantastic people.
Great ambassadors.
Yes.
What about the business community or the political community? Is there some way that you think the orchestra can interact with them?
I think with the business community, definitely. And we have business consortiums that we have, and business committees that musicians and business people work together and find, to their surprise, that they actually have a lot more in common than they thought. The political situation, we probably are careful not to get too involved in the politics of the city, only because.
But the mayor, forget about politics. I
Right,
mean,
right.
the mayor is the representative.
Of course,
In that
of
sense, so
course,
you're not
yeah.
taking a political side.
No, the
obviously.
mayor
You would
and
never.
our elected officials are very important to us and are there with us.
Okay, few questions that we have. Like to hear about Cowell and Hovannes. This comes from Robert
Bonfilio, our friend.
Yeah,
Robert, if Robert is listening,
the,
I miss you, Robert.
the harmonica player.
The great harmonica player.
player.
Well, I did the Carol Concerto with Robert, and it's a wonderful piece. I haven't done too much Hovannes. You have much more experience
I've
with
done a lot of
Hovannes than I
Hovannes,
have, so you might want to comment on that. But that's a composer that I really need to delve more
Well,
into.
the interesting thing about Hovannes for me was I did it's the most famous symphony, Mysterious Mountain,
Right.
which Stokowski premiered in 1955 at the first opening of the Houston Symphony as he was the music director. And I did it with the All-Stars, so we did it for TV. And members of Philadelphia and Chicago, all these great orchestras, and Boston and New York, they all came to me, not all, many came to me and said, how come we don't know this piece and how come we don't know this composer? I mean, I wonder when the New York Philharmonic lasted. They probably lasted a piece of Hovannes when Andrei Kostelanetz was commissioning the occasional pieces. So here's a composer who the audiences really love, and I've actually gotten to like a lot more now. I've always liked his music, but the Second Symphony, The Mysterious Mountain, is an extraordinary symphony.
But that goes back to your question of this lost several generations of composers, American composers that are just not played.
That's right. I mean, and yet they have to convince people.
Yeah.
I remember I did a concert with the Juilliard Orchestra last year where I did William Schumann's Sixth Symphony, David Diamond's Fourth Symphony, and the Druckmann and Viola Concerto that was written for my father-in-law. And I mean, it was. They wanted me to do a string program that Schumann fifth is strings, the rounds, Diamond, and the Bernstein Serenade. And I said, well, I want the winds and brass, the percussion. I want them to experience William Schumann and all these great Juilliard composers.
Right. That they didn't know, right?
They didn't. When I asked the audience, how many of you have ever played a piece of David Diamond in the orchestra? Fabulous orchestra. Not one. Anyone play a piece of Jacob Druckmann? Not one. Anyone play a piece of William Schumann? There were about 4 or 5 brass players who had played the New England Triptych and Band.
Right. Oh, it's a great piece, though.
Which I did with the Marine Band on my TV series. Let me see. Let's see. What premieres are you currently working on or waiting on, and when will they be performed?
Well, we have a premiere coming up by Jeremy Gill, who's writing a piece for 4-hand piano, 1 piano, 2 players.
Great.
We have a premiere by David Felder coming up. We have a premiere by JoAnn Symphony that she's writing for Buffalo. So we have a lot of new pieces coming up.
Tremendous.
Yeah.
What you're doing is just extraordinary. It's just a joy
We're
to
in a
speak
very
to you.
lucky place there. I mean, Buffalo has a history of new music, mostly from Lucas Foss, of course. But it still has that in the air in Buffalo of taking
Special
risks.
place and a special
Yeah.
history, and it's nice to see it continuing. Yeah. Thank you so much, JoAnn.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thank you for being with us.